It's Monday. Let's do a mock off season. What is going on, guys? Welcome back to Talking Jets with Tigo. My name is Tigo. I am covered in baby powder, as it seems like I always am nowadays. But we're going to do an entire mock offseason, so buckle up. We're going to handle free agency, the draft, and everything in between, rebuilding this New York Jets team from the bottom to the top. So buckle in. This might be a long one, but I'm going to try to make sure we go through this as quickly as possible. Let's hop right into the offseason and do the things that we can do first, which is going to be re-signing our own players, extending our own players, and restructuring / cutting our own players. And this process is actually really, really easy because we're only going to cut one player, really, and then we're going to restructure 3 with the possibility of a 4th if we need the money down the line. But I'm going to hold off because this person might also be a cut candidate depending on how things go. And so let's start with the cuts. And I think the easiest player right now that you can cut from the New York Jets, I think the only person that's just not going to live through this whole scenario, this whole offseason, is unfortunately tight end CJ Uzomah. I don't think he's going to be a part of the plan moving forward. We've got a lot of young pieces on the back end of the roster in the tight end room that can come in and play significant minutes. And he's just getting old at this point. He's going to be 32 this season, and you can't justify an $11 million cap hit for a player that played as badly as he did, was as injured as often as he was, especially when you've got guys in the wings that are much younger, much healthier, and probably going to play significant roles moving forward. So right now we move on with this offseason with Zach Kuntz, Jeremy Ruckert, and Tyler Conklin as our tight end room, but we're going to address that moving forward. And then we're going to get to the restructures. There's only 3 restructures that we're going to do at the beginning of the offseason immediately. And that's going to be, we're going to restructure Allen Lazard's contract, freeing up $6.6 million in cap space. We're going to restructure Jonathan Franklin Myers' contract, freeing up $9.2 million in cap space. And then we're also going to restructure Quinnen Williams' contract, freeing up $10.6 million in cap space. And the goal and the idea there is to create enough of a bubble, enough space for us to really go into this offseason and do a lot of really, really good things. Now, I did mention a player that we might cut / restructure, and that is Laken Tomlinson. I'm not going to make that decision at the beginning of the offseason, and the biggest reason is we don't know how things are going to fall out. We don't know if we're going to be able to acquire a guard in free agency. We don't know if we're going to be able to draft a guard in free agency, and the amount of money that we have, I think that gives us and puts us right in and around $40-ish million in cap space is more than enough to go out and really hit free agency hard and re-sign our players, and to go out, like, it gives us a ton of flexibility. And you'll see, because I go really hard in free agency this year to make sure that we address positions of need and to go out and get our guys. But before we do that, we have to talk about the players that are not on the roster technically, but that were with the team last year that I want to bring back. And there are a couple of guys that I do. The first player that I want to bring back is going to be the special teams unit in Thomas Morstead and Greg Zuerlein. I'm going to give Greg Zuerlein a league minimum veteran contract, 1 year, $1.2 million. At 38, I feel it hard pressed to give him more than, the league minimum in that situation. And it's not something that I feel comfortable doing. That's the reality of it. Greg Zuerlein, I'm going to give 1 year, $3.5 million. Again, I'm not going to extend him super long-term, 37 at this time, but he was, I think, our top point getter last year. Like, he was clutch when he needed to be, and so you got to bring those guys back. I think you got to make that a priority if you're Joe Douglas this offseason. We're also going to be bringing back Kenny Yeboah on a 1-year, $1 million deal. Just give him a league minimum deal and tell him, like, hey, we really, really like you and we want you on this team. Let's see if you can compete and get tight end 3, because it is up for grabs legitimately. It's going to be between you and Zach Kuntz, because I'm not bringing in another tight end in free agency. Like, that's just not going to happen. So you or Zach Kuntz needs to secure and solidify tight end 3. That is your job to take, and I think he jumps at the bit to get an opportunity to be tight end 3. I'm also going to bring back Justin Hardy. I'm going to give him a 2-year, $4 million deal. So it's $2 million this year, $2 million last year. We have the cap space to do it. He is such an important player to the special teams unit. And if we can, like, again, I'm not the big fan of paying him a ton of money. If he's asking for a lot more money to be that, then I let him walk. We have a lot of really, really nice pieces on the defense and on the offense that can play special teams. But if you can bring him back for such a cheap deal at $2 million, do it. Make it happen, bringing him back. A fan favorite last year, a guy that I think played exceptionally well until he got hurt, sadly, and I'm going to reward that and bring him back. I'm going to bring Quentin Jefferson back, 1 year, $2 million. I think he played exceptionally well up there in the middle next to Quinnen Williams. And another interior defensive lineman that I'm going to bring back is Solomon Thomas, who had a career year last year, and I'm going to give him a 1 year, $3 million deal. He gets more money than Quentin Jefferson just because he stayed healthy, right? Health plays a big role, and that's that. Now we're going to stay on the defensive side of the ball, and we're going to bring back 2 safeties. Ashton Davis and Chuck Clark are going to get very similar deals, but Chuck Clark, because he was hurt, isn't going to get anything more than a prove-it 1 year, $3 million deal. And Ashton Davis, I think, proved that he has a role on this team, a significant role on this team, and I think he can play significant minutes on the defense. So I'm going to give him a 3-year, $12 million deal. That breaks down to about $4 million per year, and I think that solidifies the defense. You're not worried about the defense. You've got all of the pieces that you need on the defense. And at this point, it's just accessories. How can we accessorize the defense as best as possible? And then the last player that I'm going to bring back is going to be Connor McGovern. I'm going to give him a 1 year, $1.2 million deal. He got hurt. He was already playing on a $2 million deal last year. It's hard to justify him asking for more money, especially since he got relegated. He's essentially going to be a backup center for this team. And that's the goal there. If he doesn't want to come back, cool, that's fine. But I think that if he can stay in New York, stay on the team that was with him, and he's going to get an opportunity to play probably because there is some influx. We're just going to put the best 5 offensive linemen on the field. And I think Connor McGovern has the ability to be one of those best 5. And he's still young enough, Connor McGovern, to justify going and getting one more big payday with a good year of play. So that's that. And those are all of the players that are currently on the New York Jets that I'm going to extend or re-sign. Now, one of the things that I will be doing is I am going to be franchise tagging Bryce Huff. Now, the reason I'm franchise tagging Bryce Huff is because we're going to get a trade out of the way right now. Before the draft, before free agency, we're going to get a trade done and in the books, and we're going to trade Bryce Huff and Zach Wilson and our 6th round pick 187, to the Los Angeles Rams for their 2nd round pick 51. The idea here is and we'll talk about more of my thoughts on Bryce Huff on Wednesday's episode of Armchair GM on the Talkin' Jets channel. So tune into that. Me and Green Bean are going to have a heated debate about this. But I have a hard line in the sand in money that I'm willing to give Bryce Huff. But I am also not going to let Bryce Huff walk for free. I am going to get something for him. And a team like the Los Angeles Rams have the ability and probably the want for a edge rusher like Bryce Huff, who is a massive liability in the run game, but a real positive in the pass game. And with their 3-4 amoeba fronts that they run in Los Angeles, I think he'll fit really, really well. And because a guy like Aaron Donald is going to really be able to pick up the slack in those 5-man fronts where where Bryce Huff is going to struggle incredibly. Zach Wilson gets to go to a new home and probably sit behind Stafford while they're trying to go and win and be competitive. He's familiar with that coaching staff. He's familiar with the offense. He gets to go to the West Coast, which I think is somewhere he's going to be more comfortable, and just ends his time in New York Not in the greatest of terms, but the New York Jets do get a second-round pick in return in this mock trade, and I think everybody wins here. The New York Jets get the second-round pick that they need. The Los Angeles Rams get the edge rusher that they so desperately need, freeing up their first-round pick to be, doesn't have to be an edge rusher. It can be another edge rusher. It frees up their first-round pick to do whatever they want, and they get a better backup than what they currently have on the staff, and a guy that they can develop and learn and hopefully build into something there, and then an additional sixth-round pick to hit on something late. And so that's all of the things that have to do with our current players, restructures, trades, all of it. We're done. We have no more trades except for draft day for players or anything like that. It is about accumulating assets, not about spending them. We got to bring in as many players. I want to have a serious competition at camp. I want to be cutting draft picks. I want to be cutting players that we just signed. I want a really good competition. And so we go into the offseason, and the first move that's made in this offseason is we are going to bring in a veteran quarterback behind Aaron Rodgers, and we're going to do that with Marcus Mariota. I know a lot of people are going to be talking about the Jacoby Brissetts and some of these other guys and these other names in free agency. I just think that the reality is that Jacoby Brissett is going to have suitors for him to be a starter. When you look at teams like Atlanta and Vegas and New England possibly, those are all teams that might not be in a position to draft a quarterback, or like in New England's case, might want to take Marvin Harrison instead, but will be in a position to bring in a veteran who can just operate the offense. And Atlanta is a team that's right there on the cusp. They're a quarterback away, and Jacoby Brissett is an upgrade for them. I feel like Marcus Mariota is a good enough backup to come in and, play well. Now, a dream situation for me is Tyler Huntley. If Tyler Huntley squeaks free, I would love to bring him. Same deal, 1 year, $4 million. Whoever the backup is, that's what I want to give him, is 1 year, $4 million. But I think a more realistic option for the New York Jets is guys like Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota, and I went with a guy that just doesn't have the turnover problem in Marcus Mariota. Jameis Winston likes to throw interceptions. He is a gunslinger, but I'd rather be safe with the football, let our offense operate within itself and not have hero ball. And I think that's what Marcus Mariota can provide if in any scenario Aaron Rodgers gets hurt. But he's not. He's going to be healthy all year, and he's going to take us to the promised land. The next big important piece is I need to bring in offensive linemen, and I'm going to bring in two. I'm going to bring in offensive guard Pat Elflein to be a backup guard. 1 year, $1.5 million. And now I've got an interior offensive line that I am super comfortable with, because I got 6 players on the interior of the offensive line that can all play that I feel comfortable with. The interior of the offensive line is done. Pat Elflein is the backup, Connor McGovern is the backup, and Wes Schweitzer is the backup right there. Left guard, center, right guard in that order, right from Elflein, McGovern, Schweitzer, and then you've got your interior offensive line starting in, left guard Laken Tomlinson, center Joe Tippmann, and right guard AVT. Everything works, and it's perfect there. And then I'm going to bring in an offensive tackle, obviously, and I'm going to swing big here. And I'm going to bring in a guy that I think a lot of people are going to be iffy on because he does have an injury history. But I'm going to bank on the truth of the fact that he had a botched surgery. I'm going to bring back former Green Bay Packer at this point, David Bakhtiari, the offensive tackle. When healthy, David Bakhtiari is a Pro Bowl level tackle. And he hasn't been healthy in recent years because he has a botched knee surgery. He had pieces of dead meniscus left in his knee that was causing discomfort and fluid in his knee. Well, he got the surgery to fix that, and he is still in a position, and if I'm being honest, young enough where I feel comfortable with him being in there at 33. I'm not going to give him and blow the doors off of the water, right? He has been injured for the last 3 years, but I am going to give him a 2-year, $22 million deal, the same deal that we gave Dwayne Brown. Fudge around the numbers a little bit so that it's not super heavy on the front end, and just give him the money to come here to the New York Jets. I don't think he's going to be able to command a whole ton of money being cut from the Packers, obviously, with his injury history and all that stuff, but I do need to bring somebody in, and David Bakhtiari is a really, really high-level player, and I know a lot of people aren't going to be a big fan of what I'm going to say, but the right tackle for the New York Jets right now is Carter Warren. Unless I address that in the draft, I'm going to. But I feel comfortable with Carter Warren as the backup left tackle. I had a really, really high grade on Carter Warren. I had a second-round grade on Carter Warren, and I feel comfortable with him as the backup left tackle if he needs to come in and play, especially with a full offseason of health and being able to just work on his craft and dive into the playbook and really, really get going in the best way possible. So that is that. We stay on the offensive side of the ball. There's going to be a ton of offensive side of the ball work. And we keep doing that, and we're going to swing big in the wide receiver market. And the more I hear about reports, it seems more and more likely that players like Mike Evans and players like T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd or whoever it is aren't going to sneak free. And that's a sad, sad truth. But you do keep seeing reports that wide receiver Calvin Ridley might sneak free, that the Jaguars are uninterested in giving the Falcons a second-round pick if they do extend him. And if that's the case, the New York Jets should chomp at the bit to bring in a guy like Calvin Ridley to the team, and that's exactly what I did. I went out, I signed Calvin Ridley, I gave him a 3-year $21 million deal, and the idea there is 3-year, $42 million deal. It's 14 per year. It is right around the deal. It's more than the, Allen Lazard deal because he's being brought in to really be a wide receiver too for the New York Jets. And it just pushes Allen Lazard down the board. But I'm not done yet. We're going to go back to the wide receiver market, a player that we courted last year, and I'm going to bring him in finally, and I'm going to bring in wide receiver Odell Beckham Jr. 1 year, $8 million deal. I think he proved last year that he doesn't necessarily have the legs to be that wide receiver 2 that Baltimore wanted him to be. They wanted him to be wide receiver 1, and then Zay Flowers just took that job away from him. But then he also showed that he didn't really have the ability to be a wide receiver 2. In the slot, operating as a wide receiver 3 for the New York Jets, I think is the perfect opportunity for him. It's the best place for him, and I just love that idea. I did want to get one more body on the interior of the defensive line before we go into our big offseason swing, which I'm going to talk to you guys about in a second, but I did bring in Tiari Tart, the interior defensive lineman currently with the Texans, 1 year, $2.1 million. And again, just come in and compete. Big body who can play in the interior there. And then the last but not least, we're going to swing big. We're going to make sure that this offense is fully loaded. Last year, we tried to swing big with Odell Beckham and Dalvin Cook, and it just wasn't the right players in the situation, and it wasn't the right guys. But I think that there is an opportunity to go out and get the right guys. I brought in Odell Beckham. I brought in Calvin Ridley. We're going to make this offense unstoppable, and we're going to bring in running back. Yep, you heard me right. Running back Austin Ekeler. I'm going to give him a 2-year, $14 million deal. Maybe it's going to be 14 to 16 million. So it's $7 or $8 million a year, right in and around that area and that vicinity. I don't think he wants to go back to the Chargers, new coaching staff, and all of these different things. They didn't want to pay him last year, and I don't think he's going to want to have to deal with all of that stuff again. Bring him in to be a running back tandem with Breece Hall. Breece Hall is that dude, but I don't want to be just relying on Breece Hall in the backfield. He needs help, and Austin Ekeler is one hell of a running back. And again, with this offseason, we haven't even gotten to the draft yet, the New York Jets legitimately have an opportunity to be in. This is an all-in year, and that's the point. These are all-in moves. We are loading the wide receiver room. We are loading the running back room. We are bringing in a ton of talent onto the offensive line room. We're loading up this offense because that's what struggled last year, and we're giving Aaron Rodgers every possibility to be successful. Last but not least, we're going to power through the draft really, really quickly. And the first thing that needs to happen in the draft is we get to pick 10, and the New York Jets are going to trade out of pick 10. And we're going to do that immediately because the board fell in a way that I felt really comfortable that we were still going to get our guy. So we trade the number 12 pick, the number 10 pick for the number 12 pick, a round 3 pick and a round 4 pick in pick 76 and 121. And we still get our guy that I am a big fan of in Oregon State tackle, Talise Fuaga, immediately comes in and plays right tackle. And the offensive line is done. Talise Fuaga is one of my favorite players in this draft. I think he has to be the pick for the New York Jets. The only player that I would take outside of Talise Fuaga would be Joe Alt. I think Joe Alt is a stud, but I just don't think he makes it to the Jets. If he does, dope. But in this scenario, I didn't have him making it to the Jets, unfortunately. Now, this is the Zach Wilson trade. It doesn't let me add 2 players, but I did. In our minds, we all know that Bryce Huff is a part of this trade. We now have a second-round pick, and we're going to use that pick on a wide receiver. Yeah, I'm bringing in another wide receiver, and I'm bringing in a big body. I'm bringing in Brendan Rice out of USC. 6'3", showed a real contested catch ability, and again, it's just about competition in the wide receiver room, and that's what I really, really want. I think the best scenario is pushing Allen Lazard down the depth chart as far as possible. And no offense to Xavier Gipson and Jason Brownlee and Irv Charles, but the more we can have players that we drafted in our wide receiver lineup, the better we are, the better we are off. And I love those undrafted free agent guys, but I'd rather not have UDFAs in my wide receiver room. I'd rather have some guys that are studs. And Brendan Rice did a lot of really good things at the Senior Bowl. Really liked his tape. And let's be honest, it'd be really cool to see the Rice last name on a Jets jersey in the wide receiver room. But now the New York Jets wide receiver room is absolutely stacked. Garrett Wilson, Calvin Ridley, Brendan Rice, Odell Beckham Jr., Allen Lazard, and Jason Brownlee, Xavier Gipson, Irv Charles. We've really got a deep, deep wide receiver room. We got depth at a position that we lacked depth so heavily last season, so as many bodies as possible. We go into the third round with our pick in the third round, and we're going to take offensive guard Christian Haynes. Now, why did I take the offensive guard? Well, you remember the conversation that we had about Laken Tomlinson. Well, by bringing in Christian Haynes, a guard that I believe seriously can start at the NFL level day one, it gives us the ability that if we want to, we can now move on from Laken Tomlinson. We can cut him with a post-June 1st designation, free up cap space, and if there's a late free agent that we want to go out and get, we can. If there is a linebacker, a interior defensive lineman, anything, if a player sneaks out at the end of the scenarios and all of those things, that becomes available, like Dalvin Cook did last year, like Odell Beckham, who waited so long to sign. If a player becomes available, we have that opportunity, and now the interior of the offensive line can still be the 3 guys that I signed to be the backup, but now AVT moves back to his home at left guard where he should be, and Christian Haynes has the opportunity to be the right guard, and we can move on from Laken Tomlinson, or you can just cut a guy like Wes Schweitzer, you can cut Pat Elflein. Again, they don't have such big contracts that you have to keep them on the roster. You can cut Connor McGovern because Wes Schweitzer can play in the interior as well. You have flexibility if you didn't want to move on from Laken. This is what this pick does, and I love that for the New York Jets. We continue on in the third round, and this is noted draft crush with the Denver Broncos pick. We didn't have this pick before, so we weren't expecting to be able to do this. We're going to take him anyway. We're going to take Michael Pratt, the quarterback out of Tulane. And the goal here is that Michael Pratt is emergency QB3. It is going to be a redshirt year for the next 2 years. And the goal and the hope is that he never sees the field, period. Have him learn, have him develop. He's still young. He's going to be 22 when the season starts. And I think that he's got it. He just needs time. And we can give him time. We can afford to do that. Next, we're going to go into the interior of the defensive line. We're going to take Tyler Davis, interior defensive lineman out of Clemson. More competition in that interior defensive line room. And like I did before, all of the guys on the interior of the defensive line outside of Quinnen Williams have deals that you can move on from. If Tyler Davis comes in and wins a job, awesome. You can move on from Quentin Jefferson. You can move on from Solomon Thomas. You can move on from Thierry Tart. None of these guys have contracts that are super binding that you're going to be like worried about in a situation where you draft an interior defensive lineman. We continue on in round 4 with pick 121, and this is the Denver Broncos pick. So we're going to take edge Justin Aboigbe, I believe is how you pronounce it. Bring in another guy. Keep that pipeline of edge rushers. Bryce Huff left. Okay, let's bring in someone on the back end of everybody slides up, right? Will McDonald, you're going to get more reps. Michael Clemens, you're going to get more reps. Well, we got to fix and fill in that back end of the roster. And Justin Egboigbe is that guy who's going to come in and fill in those needs. We need more competition on the tight end room. I don't just want to hand the job to Zach Kuntz or Kenny Yeboah, so we're going to bring in another body to camp to compete. A.J. Barner out of Michigan in the first round. Boy, can this guy block in the run game. I love that. Does he have it in the passing game? We got to see what we can get out of A.J. Barner. And this is a great pick in the 5th round. And now we got 3 picks in the 7th round. No pick in the 6th round because we obviously traded that to the Los Angeles Rams for their 2nd round pick, as long as Zach Wilson and Bryce Huff. So we're going to do 3 7th round picks. I'm going to show them all right here. We're going to get Josh Proctor, safety, to come in and fill out the back end of the safety room, see if he can come in and compete and maybe take Ashton Davis's role on the back end, since Ashton Davis got promoted to a Jordan Whitehead type of job. Bring in another linebacker to compete. We got to start figuring out a plan post CJ Mosley in that linebacker room, which seems like it's going to be Jamien Sherwood, but you got to keep filling it in, right? Depth. And then with the last pick in the draft, mystery relevant, is running back Josh Williams out of LSU. And it's just to bring in a guy to compete with Israel Abanikanda on the back end of the room. This is probably a practice squad candidate if all things are being considered, but I didn't want to walk away without bringing in a running back to compete and to just be in that room. And there you have it. There's the offseason. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I know this was a long video, but I appreciate you hanging out and watching all of it. Let me know, what would you have changed? Who would you have targeted? How would have you handled the draft? Let me know all of those things in the comment section below. And last but not least, go Jets.